Cheers. I had to put the family to sleep. Today was one of those days where I wanted to get into a live live stream, but family called. Four young kids at home. Now, I don't know about you, but this is the most I have had face to face with my family really since all my kids were born. And so that has been a challenge. Now, we do homeschool, so it's not like it's totally alien to us to have the kids at home uh, routinely. My wife takes on that responsibility to homeschool the kids, and it's been great. It's been really fun to do that. I, of course, am a fish out of water when it comes to that. I'm not sure where in the curriculum they should be, and daddy home is a distraction because they just want to play with me. Um, and also, this is the most time my wife and I have spent together since probably, shortly after we were married, when we were in between education and jobs and whatnot. We had a few months together, so it's been interesting. And I've seen some statistics from the World Health Organization and other places that domestic violence or domestic disputes are on the rise. In fact, there was a joke going around from one of my groups of friends that said, last as of yesterday, violent crimes. There's been zero murders, zero rapes, zero armed robberies, and 78,372 domestic uh, arguments. so, so that just was a clever joke of spending so much time together. But I hope that you go into that um, hoping to become a better dad, a better husband, and really take that opportunity. It's almost like a forced vacation um, that you can take advantage of and really give that quality time to your family. And so that's why these live streams seem a little bit discombobulated in terms of timing. I'm hoping to get on a better schedule, maybe early in the morning. This one is about 8:26 in the evening here in Hawaii. So back in the East Coast, that would be shoot 2:30 in the morning. So if anybody's up in the East Coast, that's pretty late. But yeah, it's an interesting time. And if you're like me, the days run together. I couldn't remember if today was Wednesday or Tuesday or Thursday, and we couldn't remember. My wife and I couldn't remember when we cooked certain food that was stored in the fridge. Just that things start to run together. So so take advantage. No work, so try to keep yourself entertained via other methods. And like I said, having young kids is a full-time job in itself. So I could be consumed completely with just helping my wife care for them and do homeschooling and that kind of thing. But I've tried to take some advice from people like Scott Adams and others who, would say this is a time to hone a new skill, to work on something to get better at. And I'll give you two suggestions. Well, two things that I've done. Well, three things. So this might help somebody out there. But basically, step one was my health. So I really wanted to keep my health on point, and what that means is diet and exercise. And um, one thing that I learned a while back is that you really don't know about your diet. You really don't know about your diet unless you track your calories, unless you write down what your calories are daily, write down everything you consume, whether it's, a snack or a beverage or whatever. You write it all down, and then you can have actually a full understanding of where your diet lies in the scheme of healthy diets versus unhealthy diets. And what I didn't realize is how easy it was to eat excess calories. It is pretty darn easy for my height, my age, my height, um, my body mass index or whatever it is, BMI. So once I started tracking my calories, that really opened up a whole new world for me. Now I don't do it consistently, but I have done it on and off for about 5 years. And I'll go through, a week or two where I won't log, but for the most part, I'm logging. And what I find is when my diet is on point and I'm trying to keep my caloric intake at a consistent level, and I'm trying to keep, so if you have a limit of how many calories you can consume in a day, and you have a whole array of options with which to fill that that bag of calories, then you're going to be a lot more picky in what you eat. It's just going to be a natural tendency to want to eat cleaner and want to eat healthier. I mean, that was the case with me. So, those of you looking to do a diet thing while we're here in isolation and in confinement, then maybe it could be simple as just starting to log what you're eating. You don't have to necessarily make any changes, any dramatic changes in your diet, but just that discipline, that daily discipline of logging what you eat, could lead to better results down the road. So that's the one thing. Exercise. So I've been an exercise person. I was in the military, active duty for quite a while. I was an athlete in high school and college, and so I was always doing exercise. Gym. The military is big. The Marines are big in the gym. So that was just my culture, my life. And then as I got older and got a full time high pressure job, left the military, had a family, had children. All of a sudden, your time to go to the gym drops to, and that for me was eye opening. So a lot of people, how they respond is they just kind of don't exercise anymore. And I didn't want that to be the case with me. And I lived in a new location. I didn't have any equipment. I didn't have a gym membership. I didn't want to take time away from my family. So I decided that I was going to do what I could. And I started really, really small. And this is how small I started. I bought a jump rope, and that was it. And my system was to wake up every morning, and right after I got out of bed, I'd go out into my carport and I'd jump rope for 5 minutes, just 5 minutes. That's it. And I would stage my shoes by the door. And this is after a period of time of not exercising and getting a little bit out of shape, like most men, most dads will do when they have a family. And so what I found is that once cheers, once once that habit started to form, then the potential for me to go past 5 minutes started to rise, and also the potential for me to do things other than uh, other than jump rope started to rise too. So, question. Okay, how does keto work? I'm scared of it. Does keto work? I've dabbled in keto, and really, so let me tell you a little bit about diet. When I was growing up, I was an athlete, like I said. I was a Marine, still am a Marine, and a lot of meatheads in the Marine Corps, a lot of muscle-bound maniacs. I mean, really, really strong people that I came into contact both in college and in the Marine Corps. And and so the bodybuilding scene, some of that stuff was in the a young male's mind, at least in the friends that I traveled around in. That bodybuilding scene was on people's minds, and I remember seeing what the bodybuilders recommended consuming in terms of diet. And one of the things they recommended consuming was your weight in pounds, uh, protein grams. So, I weigh 170 pounds. I should consume 170 grams of protein per day. Now, if you've ever tried that, that's really, really hard, especially if you're not used to it. And there's certain other, macro level nutrients that you want to consume, whether it's fats or carbohydrates. And so keto, the question I just got asked was on keto. So keto minimizes your carbs, really minimizes your carbs, and goes really heavy on the fats and the proteins. So really, your macros are the big things, the three big macros that if you log your foods, are going to be real eye opening for you. And I have dabbled in very low carb diets, which would be the keto kind of diet, and it's made a difference. One thing that carbs will do is affect your blood sugar, and your blood sugar when it spikes and when it peaks and crashes after you have a meal, it's going to make you tired. It's going to make you sleepy. So if you've ever eaten lunch, at work, and then you come back and try to get some work done afterwards, or you go to a meeting and everybody's kind of like they got the post lunch blues, the post lunch nose bobs or head bobs, so that's because of the blood sugar issues with carbohydrates. Well, it hurt my kidneys. So the protein, I laughed because this was a big concern when I was coming up. I mean, 25 years ago when I was looking at the protein diet. And that was the fear that was put into me from some study somewhere that I read. And now that I'm older and I realize that it's just food. It's just a macro food. It's just, more grams of one of the three macros. It's not hard at all to eat your body weight in grams of carbs. Not hard at all. In fact, you could double your body weight per day in carb intake, and you may not realize that. So that's why it's helpful to log, so you can kind of build a mental picture on this. So what I do is I do very, very heavy protein. That's really the only macro that I try to track in my diet. I do look at the fats and the carbs a little bit. If you go higher in fats, your hunger will decrease. So if you're working against issues of hunger, then if you start to really pay attention to your fats, if you up those fats, then your hunger urges will start to go down over the course of a day. So that helps with your daily caloric intake. And really, it's simple. Weight loss, weight gain, whether you're trying to build muscle or lose weight, it's simple. Calories in, calories out. And you have you have a basic uh, daily caloric intake that you need to consume in order to maintain where you are. If you drop below that, it doesn't have to be much below that, maybe 100 or 200 calories below that level, you're going to lose weight. It's just simple physics. And if you increase above that, 200 to 500 calories, you're gonna increase in weight. And so if you're trying to get big or build muscle, people will have a caloric surplus, and bodybuilders will talk about this. And if you're trying to lose weight, you'll have a caloric deficit. This potato diet that you may have heard of, that Penn from Penn and Teller did, he wrote a book about it. So that diet is all about caloric deficit. And the way the way that diet works is you consume massive amounts of potatoes. In fact, I think that's the only thing you consume for every single meal, every single day. And because potatoes make you full, you end up eating far less calories per day than you may realize. And you can eat as many potatoes as you want. So uh, there's some YouTube channels of people who've tried that and they've lost a bunch of weight. So um, I think what's going to cause more damage to your kidneys or organ function would be any kind of processed stuff that you put into your body, any kind of, you know, labels of ingredients that are, a mile long, um, where half the ingredients you don't even recognize what they are. So I think that's probably more harmful to you. And this is just my opinion. I have no research to back this up. I'm just suggesting that's probably where you want to avoid putting stuff in your body. So anyway, so with the exercise, what I've decided, I used to do really long exercise routines, maybe an hour. And again, I do it all at home. I started with a jump rope, branched out to some kettlebells, and then slowly worked up to a power rack, some free weights. My most recent addition, and this is building up over 6 years. My most recent addition was a set of dumbbells. So I have a stack of dumbbells, and it's allowed me to make variety in my exercise. And so I mentioned logging your nutrition. You can also log your exercise routines. And what that does is it keeps you disciplined and shows you real time progress of how you're doing. So when you do another exercise, you can look back and see what you did last time, and it holds you accountable and allows you to see those incremental improvements or those incremental declines, and you can start to investigate why those declines might happen or those improvements might happen. It could be your nutrition's on point. Maybe your nutrition's not on point, and you didn't really have a great diet the day before. Your energy's low, and so therefore your routine kind of suffers a little bit. Um, but what I've heard recently is that for older men, middle age, I don't want to say older, but over 40, that if you can keep your workout routines to under 30 minutes and maybe even under 25 minutes, you're going to maximize your human growth hormone spike in your body, and you're going to minimize your your stress hormones. So the longer you exercise, the more your stress hormones are going to kick in, and your cortisol levels are going to kick in, and that's going to be not great for your body or your health, overall health. Um, so over 40, you can maximize human growth hormone under 30 minutes. So I've been trying to keep all my exercise routines to under 30 minutes. High intensity interval training is mostly what I do. 30 seconds on, 30 seconds off, 40 seconds on, 20 seconds off. I use kettlebell routines, dumbbell routines. I find people on YouTube that I like. OB Vincent's one that comes to mind. Funk Roberts is another one that comes to mind. There's a bunch out there, and I'll literally just write down the routines they do. I'll put it in my log app, and I'll run through those. And then once you build a base of several exercises that you like, you can start to make your own routines, and I've done that as well. So jump rope's still a big part of my routine. Kettlebells, dumbbells. I don't use free weights much at all, except to do things like deadlifts or maybe overhead squats at this point. And a very cheap, low cost exercise piece of gear that you can also buy are rings, gymnastics rings. You can also do TRX, which is similar. It's like those straps that you see come down. They can suspend over a door frame or whatnot. And I have both of those. I think the rings were my second purchase after the jump rope, and those are great. Those are fantastic. If I could have only two pieces of equipment, I would have a jump rope and rings. And if you offer me five pieces of equipment, then I get things like a TRX or a kettlebell, um, and maybe some PVC pipe or something like that for stretching routines. But you can basically, I had to adapt my philosophy to my life environment, having a family and having a high stress job, so that I could do something at home that was beneficial, healthy for me, in compressed time with the equipment I had, with body weight, calisthenics. I got into that quite a bit. So anyway, that's how you can improve yourself during this long duration of isolation. And so you should hopefully, if you come out of this April stay-at-home order wherever you live, you are in better health. You have better nutrition. You have better habits in terms of exercise. That would be the ultimate goal. Yeah. Um, so so that's that. And I was getting a message from somebody. Sorry about that. Excuse me. All right. So getting back, you could also spend this time and learn a new skill. So I think that I think that especially if you've lost your job, like me. Now, I had two jobs. One was more of a part-time job, although it was pretty demanding. It is pretty demanding. I still have that one. But my full-time job, which was very high pressure, I lost. And I have so when you have all this excess free time and it's not completely engulfed by your family, which is fine. Um, I'm from which country? I'm from the U.S. So I live in the U.S. I live in Hawaii. So somebody's asking, where do I live? I live in Hawaii. I'll talk more about that in just a second. So learn a new skill. So what kind of new skill could you learn? Well, I've heard it framed recently again by Scott Adams. I've read some of his books, and he's very influential on me, especially in the last 6 months to a year period of my life. And he describes something called a talent stack. So you have, talent one or craft one, and then you have different disciplines that you have expertise or knowledge in, and then as you pile them all together, the gain is exponential in terms of what you can contribute to a business, a small business, or a large organization, or just people in general. So, for example, you have the skill of writing. That's a talent. You have the skill of speaking. That's another talent. You can create PowerPoint presentations or presentations in general. That's a skill set. You are good with numbers. That's a skill set. You're good with people. That's a skill set. You're learning more about human psychology. You're learning about maybe perhaps persuasion, sales. The art of sales is a talent. Uh, I would say being a good husband, being a good father is a talent. So anyway, you layer these on top of each other, and then all of a sudden, the overall outcome is really high quality and really valuable uh, really valuable offerings that you can extend to the people you're involved with. So, all of us should be trying to work on our talent stack and expanding that uh, throughout our whole life. I mean, ideally, you never stop growing, right? So you go to school, you finish high school, you go to college, perhaps you get a degree, maybe you go to graduate school, maybe you don't. You start a job, you're starting to build skills, you're starting to learn how to work with certain groups of people, work in groups, you're starting to learn how to um, interface with customers, interface with businesses, interface with partners, and all of that is adding to your skill set. You're seeing good leadership, you're seeing bad leadership. You maybe are put in a position of leadership where you can make decisions and mess up and learn from those mistakes. So all of that is adding to your talent stack. Maybe you're taking courses online. Maybe you're not really that comfortable with numbers, so you take a finance course to understand really what the accountants are saying at your small business or what the bookkeeper is saying at your small business. Maybe you maybe you take a class in negotiations because you want to be able to purchase a vehicle at a cheaper rate than and not get taken to the cleaner by the dealership down the corner. So in this time, you can really um, expand your talent stack if you commit to something that you enjoy doing and is easy. You can break through the barriers of of learning it. So a couple that come to mind and various ones that I've tried in the past when I've had periods of time is I've tried to dive into coding, so you can learn a computer coding language. You don't have to learn it to the point where you're a master programmer, but any familiarity that you have with a coding language is going to be good. It's just going to be good with the way the world works in this day and age. It's going to have good benefits for you. You can actually understand what people are talking about when they're talking about technical or technology solutions, and that's very valuable. So don't pass up the opportunity to maybe take some courses in coding or teach yourself. There's plenty of resources out there. What codes? I don't know. Xcode, I think, is what they were using for iPhone apps. You can learn. Uh, let's see. You can learn HTML5, I think, or CSS, and um, anyway, I'm blanking on some of the names, but PHP. That's another one. Learn. I'd say learn the web codes, the web coding, HTML, all that stuff. That's a little bit more valuable, I would say, for modern day. Now, the hardcore languages on the back end of applications, that stuff's a little bit more intense. C++ or Python or any of these other ones that you're really building, you know, standalone applications. That's also valuable. And if you learn the basics in one language, that's very transferable to another language. So uh, don't think that it's not transferable. Learning one and starting to learn another one down the road. So that's just one example. Now, what I've done, I've always wanted to understand the stock market, understand buying and trading, buying and selling stocks, what day trading is, what swing trading is, what long-term investments are. Uh, I had a bad investment experience about 15, 17 years ago, somewhere around there, where I put, $2,000 into the stock market and I lost it all, very, very quickly. I didn't know what I was doing, and that really gave me a bad taste for trading. And I started to realize recently, why let that one bad experience define how I approach this topic going forward? That's kind of dumb. I should give it another shot. And fortunately now there's paper trading that you can do with a number of different brokers. I use TD Ameritrade. That's where I lost all that money, 17 years ago. And so I set up a paper trading account with them, and I've been day trading or swing trading for the last 2.5 weeks. So starting 2.5 weeks ago, I would wake up here in Hawaii at 3 in the morning, 3:30 in the morning. Market would open at 3:30, and I would just really immerse myself and try to understand what was going on, how I do trading, not get demystify it. Oftentimes, all you need to do is demystify a new thing, and then you're good, and then you can start to grow in that discipline. So trading is one thing. I have two very small money accounts with different brokers that I've actually I haven't gone down. So the goal is to always build that account up and not go down. Um, so so far that's been pretty good. And it's a weird time to do that with the way the world is, and anxiety in the marketplace, and the stock market collapsing on this big bear market spell. But that's a great time to learn it and to hopefully figure it out. So that's one example. Another example is this podcasting. So I wanted to, and live streaming, I wanted to get comfortable extemporaneously talking with, some sort of outline that I develop over the course of a day, or over the course of 20 minutes, or over the course of a few hours, as I see things and remember things I want to chat about. So, so that's it, and like I said at the very beginning, better spouse, better husband, better wife, better parent, better family glue. I think all that's going to make you guys healthier. And so pursue that, pursue that deliberately, and make sure you go after that, because all of these things will make you a better person coming out of that. So I want to transition over to COVID. I'm here in Hawaii, and I was just looking at the most recent statistics here in Hawaii. It seems like we have a total. Let's see. This is according to the Hawaii Big Island Big Island News website. So COVID-related deaths across the state right now is at 5, and I think tomorrow we're going to hit 6. Excuse me. We've had 435 cases across the state, and expecting our 6th death tomorrow. So that's not too bad. The island that I'm on, we have 26 cases. So an increase of 3 over the last day or so. So that's where I am now. Where I used to live, which is New York State, which is where my brother lives in Buffalo, they are statewide total persons tested. They've tested 365,000 people. There's been 149,316 who've tested positive. So that's a little bit less than half have tested positive. And then new positives as of yesterday was 10,453. That's a large number. And then I think New York State set the record yesterday for number of deaths, which is not the greatest news. And I don't remember what the number was. I think it was somewhere over 1,000. So let's see if it pops up here. Yeah, anyway, I'm going to waste time looking it up. So moving on to New York City, now New York City, it appears that the daily count has actually dropped in terms of deaths, which is really fantastic news. So we are the 8th right now, and I'm on the New York City.gov Department of Health website, and this is really promising. So on the 6th, 2 days ago, the number of deaths were 327. On the 5th, the day prior, they reached a peak of 379. Yesterday, the 7th, was 235. So it dropped about 90, dropped by about 90 people from Monday to Tuesday. And then today, the 8th, it's still the 8th in Hawaii, we're down to 34 deaths. That's pretty remarkable. I would kind of doubt that 34 number. That's probably going to increase as we get more reporting coming in. I would suspect that all the reporting's not in there. So it's bad, but it's also some good news, some positive news on the horizon. I think that's why the Dow was up, and the experts say we're supposed to hit peak sometime this week, beginning tomorrow and going through Easter weekend. So I think that the total number is going to still increase, but hopefully next week we'll be on the backside and coming down the curve. That would be excellent. I think you would agree with me. That would be excellent. So Also, the COVID may have affected some of you personally. It affected me personally 2 nights ago when it led to the death of one of my friend's fathers, one of the friends I grew up with. And so that's really where it gets hit home when you know somebody. And I think if you've watched the president's news briefings, like I think that's what turned him to really deal with this in a new way was when a friend of his in Queens came down with it, and within a day, his friend was in a coma. And I think that really hit Trump directly, personally, to the point where he really is like, I got to, reassess my initial going in position to make sure I'm thinking about this right. Also, my brother discovered that his neighbor was COVID positive. So that's, strange. Obviously, Chris Cuomo, we're hearts and prayers for him to pull through. I do want to talk about a CNN piece that mentions that some of the modeling has improved. So this is from CNN.com earlier today, and it talks about record number of deaths Wednesday, but some hope as models now have less dire forecasts. And now I'm starting to quote. So more than 431,000 people in the U.S. have been infected. 14,700 have died. The record 1,858 deaths were reported on Tuesday, according to Johns Hopkins. Wednesday, there were 1,922 more, so Wednesday was worse than Tuesday. Andrew Cuomo said there were 779 coronavirus deaths across the state Tuesday, the highest number. Researchers say the peak is yet to come, all the stuff we've already talked about. And then the projections, let's see, suggest the U.S. will reach peak resource use on or around Saturday. So let's see if that pans out. Saturday, that's 3 days. Saturday, knock on wood, it won't be peak use of resources. So the good news is that the modeling shows fewer people will die from the virus than previously predicted. So this IHME model from the University of Washington that has been the foundational model the task force has been using estimated 82,000 people will die from the disease. And that was down from 93,000, I think, on Monday. And now, yesterday, or actually today, Wednesday, that estimate was lowered to 60,000, 60,415. So so it went from, we started this week, and the estimate from the model that is feeding all of the information back in to the model to make it better in real time has dropped from 93-ish thousand down to 60,000 in like 3 days. That's amazing. That's amazing. That's great news. So hopefully that's the case. Now, of course, this is just one model, and it could be wrong, and there could be more deaths. But that I saw that report, and I think that if you dig into it, it doesn't say it in the CNN piece, but if you dig into it, the report actually talks about the number of hospital beds, the number of ICU beds, and actually scaling down their prediction for how many of those two will be needed, the number of ventilators, and that's great news. So I asked this yesterday. Has anybody heard of somebody who needs a ventilator who hasn't gotten it? Has that happened? Has that been reported anywhere? I haven't seen that in the news. Now maybe it's happened, but I haven't seen it. Just something to be aware of. Okay, so that's good news, bad news on COVID. Now, today there was this, the big vote by mail thing that's come out recently, and I know here in Hawaii we are doing an all mail ballot this election cycle. So that means November 8th or whatever the date is that the general's on. The prevailing method will be mail-in ballots. Now, there will be physical locations. There's going to be 2 on my island, and there's presumably going to be, a handful on the other islands as well. And you can vote there at those locations. And I think they're going to open up voting several days before the actual general election date in order to cycle enough people through there in case there's like a bump in people who want to actually physically vote the day of the election. So that's already been decided here in Hawaii. Now, two things hit the news. One was what Trump said on the mail-in ballots in one of his press conferences, and the other one was, the whole Wisconsin thing where the Supreme Court weighed in and basically said the primary election has to go as planned. And this was turned into a big political story. You've probably seen it. So I've been mentioning, and I want to challenge everybody who sees these, if you do see it, that whenever you, I just got scotch in my eye. Whenever you see a one-sided report where it's just getting painted way too strongly in one direction, you gotta stop and say, what's the other side of this? What's the justification presented? Why did it go down like this? People are generally reasonable, at least they think they're reasonable. And so if you can figure out what their reasoned approach was to the outcome that ensued, that's going to make you a better critical thinker. So this is a great example. So you heard the reports, maybe Ruth Bader Ginsburg threw her conservative justices under the bus. The Republicans were all demagogued in Wisconsin because they were blamed for this election happening and not getting delayed and not going to paper and all these other things. So I kind of reserved judgment for the time being, and finally found an article by the National Review, a guy I read quite often, Andrew McCarthy, who's a great reporter. And I just want to set some context for this. This is the other side, and I want to read a lot of this article so you guys hear the piece. So the title is "The Supreme Court's Misunderstood Ruling on the Wisconsin's Coronavirus Primary." The court did not rule on postponement or in-person voting. Okay, so that's the opening sentence. The court did not rule on postponement or in-person voting. So that alone would be new information to some of the reports that would change the picture, right? It wasn't ruling on postponement or in-person voting. It only struck down a rule change regarding the deadline for absentee ballots. So the narrow focus of the court was the rule change regarding the deadline for absentee ballots. And as I understand it, the absentee ballots could be received up until, I think it was like the 13th or something. The 13th. But they had to be postmarked by the 7th, which is the date of the election. Now, the rule change it was suggested that maybe the absentee ballots could be postmarked after the 7th and still arrive by the 13th. And so that was the rule change that they were ruling on. And you could probably see a problem with this. If the general election closes on the 7th, and you can still have people filling out a paper ballot by mail and mailing it in on the 8th or the 9th or the 10th, and as long as it's getting to the right people by the 13th, it's going to count. That seems a little bit weird. Now you can have absentee voting potentially knowing the general outcome results, at least where it stands right now. So that's what the Supreme Court was ruling on. And it seems like both parties were kind of, behind the curve on this. There wasn't a move to postpone or amend the election until very, very recently, as in like the last week. There's a Democratic governor, and it sounds like they kind of botched this thing. And then when they tried to turn it all over to paper and mail in, they concluded I read somewhere that supposedly could overwhelm the system. And so there's a lot of confounders in this, but the whole thing is it's not as simple as maybe the one strong narrative that you read in the New York Times or see on CNN or see wherever. So now on the paper thing, so it's the New York Times has an article. I didn't read it, but I saw the headline that Democrats mail-in voting favors Democrats, Republicans oppose it, and so I'm trying to wrap my mind around this. Presumably you have a lot of younger voters who would get the mail-in ballot and be more likely to send it back in via the mail rather than on the day of the election drive to the polling place and actually cast their vote. That's probably why it favors Democrats. And Republicans, uh, and I don't want to speak for all Republicans because I haven't, made up my mind on it yet. And I'm living with the mail-in ballot here in Hawaii anyway. So, and I've cast military absentee ballots for a number of years because I was deployed, I was out of state, et cetera. So I'm comfortable with that process myself. But Trump actually made it clear that hey, he thinks its potential for fraud is high. I don't know, maybe maybe not, but there is something to say. So here's an imagination. Like, why would it be the case that it would be better to go to a polling place than to cast your mail-in vote? Or alternatively, why would it be better to cast your mail-in vote? So better to cast your mail-in vote. Let's start with that. More convenient. You get higher participation because people don't have to drive and leave their house and go stand in line at a election place. Um, you lower the barrier of entry to vote. So all those things are good, right? Now, why would you want people to drive to a polling place? Well, let's imagine why. Maybe it's because the people who are actually going to drive to a polling place have made a conscious decision and have researched enough the candidates to really know where their vote is going. And maybe the people who don't drive to the polling places to cast their vote are the people who haven't taken that time. And they might walk into the voting booth if they go with their friends or decide that they want to go. They may walk in and literally have no idea any background on any of the candidates and just pick the name that sounds the best, right? So on the one hand, you have what I say less informed voters who are more likely to vote in a mail-in ballot, and you have ideally the most informed voters who actually take the trouble to drive to the polling place to the elector the elections location and cast their ballot because they've done the research and they know where their vote is going. So there's a little bit of a case to be made for a more responsible, more informed voter on the one hand, and the risk of having uh, a whole number of votes that are not very well informed with the mail-in process. I'm not saying that's right or wrong. I'm just saying I'm trying to go through this exercise of imagining the pros and cons to mail-in versus in-person voting. So, and I haven't talked at all about fraud. So I'm not. It's not clear to me that that's a big issue with mail-in voting. Um, I'm more just talking about the the voters that do vote and the level to which they are engaged with the issues and understand the issues and are knowledgeable about the candidates in this particular election. So that's all I'll say. Anyway, so that's that, and I've been casting for about 42 minutes. Last topic, Bernie. Bernie, burn. Bernie's out, or he's suspended. So is he out? I don't know. The way Joe has been presenting in public over the last couple of weeks, I don't know about you, but it has um, caused some concerns. There's two concerns that have popped up over the last couple of weeks. First of all, he is stumbling over his words. He he looks a little bit awkward in his interchanges from his house and confused. Um, I thought that the mental state argument was a little bit overplayed, to be honest, but now I'm not so sure. Now I'm kind of nervous that he might be deteriorating mentally and cognitively to the point where he's getting confused more and more. And if that's the case, we're going to see that ramp up. We're going to see that get worse. So I think that the Democrats are in a tough spot. They got to decide whether they want to go with this go this route with a potential disastrous outcome, or change course before the convention or at the convention. And therefore, I'm not sure Bernie is entirely out. But also, people have been talking about not Mario Cuomo, he was the dad, but the Cuomo governor, Andrew Cuomo, and he's been presenting very well in public with this COVID-19 stuff, and he shows empathy, he shows strong leadership qualities, strong communication qualities, and I think Trump even tweeted he'd love to run against Andrew Cuomo, and I think Cuomo would be better than Biden right now. I do. Uh, Not sure Bernie would be better than Biden because I object to Bernie's policies more. But I think that the Democrats really need to figure out who to put up that would actually be competent in that role as president. Say what you want about Cuomo or policies of all the other candidates, they would all be at least competent and knowing, what's going on if they were put in that spot, if they were elected into that position. With Biden, I'm not so sure. So that's a concern. Also, just Me Too'd, just got Me Too'd, right? So there's a woman from the staff from back in the 90s who accused him of sexually assaulting her. And of course, this caused a lot of Twitter storm because Alyssa Milano she was very staunchly against Brett Kavanaugh's nomination and believe uh, Blasey Ford's allegations. I believe all women. And now, just in the last couple of days, she's tweeted that due process for uh, for this. So I don't know how to do that yet. Call in, uh, click to view. So so Bernie and Joe. So we got Joe Biden, and he will allow calls. I don't know how to allow calls. Let's see. I'm not using Periscope app. I'm using Ecamm. So if there's a way to enable calls on Ecamm, I'm not sure how to do that. Skype, maybe. So anyway, that is all I really wanted to talk about. I'm trying to see if there's anything else across the headlines that I wanted to chat about. I'm feeling a little more optimistic. I don't know about you. Yesterday and the day before, I was a little bit more pessimistic about the outcome, but I am feeling a little bit more optimistic. I think the COVID cases are hitting the South now, so uh, we'll see how that pans out. And then, of course, they're disproportionately hitting poorer communities because those communities tend to be more pre-existing conditions, obesity, and whatnot. And so now this is becoming, getting mixed up with the racist issue or race issue. So uh, that. Oh wait, can I do that? Let's see. So I can remove that. Okay. Can I? No. So you can see I'm messing with the technology to see what I can do with adding people. Uh, let's see. I don't want to take up too much time. Outraged. What are you outraged about? Anyway, I'm outraged too. Ah. Okay. So, oh, salut. Cheers. This is what is this? Glenlivet 12. Not a very aged Scotch. Um, oh, policy's not person. Okay, good, good. Uh, he may not be out of it. I mean, honestly, he's not mentally deteriorating like Joe Biden. I mean, I can say that. I mean, that's my impression. That's my impression. So, uh, policy's not person. Well, okay. Uh, here's what I wish. Here's what I wish. I like Bernie as a person. I think he's authentic. I don't think he's lied as much as other candidates. Um, I think he's true. He's authentic. He comes across as authentic. He comes across strong, bold. Um, I wish, I just wish that he had more experience in small business, in the private sector. I wish he had more experience making tough business decisions with hiring and firing people, with dealing with a changing customer, a changing business environment. I wish he had more experience with that so he could actually understand the business environment more. My sense is that he doesn't have that experience, Okay, personal choices over the life, the course of his life, that's fine. But when you don't have experience in a domain, you can start to make judgments on entire industries, entire ways of life, without having lived it, without having experienced it. And so that's my concern. I've been in small business for about 7 years. I've been in the military for 20 years, and it seems like, that's just what I wish with Bernie. Now, that's not a criticism that's unique to Bernie. I mean, that could apply to a lot of the candidates. They go to school, they get a law degree, they go work for they go work for a firm or something, then they go run for district attorney, then they get elected to Congress, get elected to the Senate, whatever. So again, not a lot of time in small business, but attorneys may represent small businesses. They might have that experience of kind of peeking behind the curtain and seeing what the challenges are. Um, with Bernie, I'm not so sure. So some questions as a Bernie supporter. Okay, do you believe everyone should have health care? Okay, this is a good question. So health care, I heard this. The government isn't a small business, and empathy isn't acquired. Okay, you're right. There's reasons the government is set up the way it is. But let me answer the first question. Do I believe everyone should have health care? I think that ideally, yes. Ideally, yes. Now, I think this is a topic that both sides can agree on. It's just how do you do it? So, so do you do it with a universal government system, or do you bring down the cost in the private sector and have a safety net at some level for the lowest income earners, or people who are unemployed, like we do now, Medicaid and Medicare, um, and do it that way. So one analogy I've heard is we don't have really a market-based healthcare system, so don't misunderstand what we have. We have some weird, blind, complicated, hard to understand healthcare system where I heard the analogy of you going to a grocery store, and you go to a grocery store and on the shelves there's no prices. So you go and you know you don't need to necessarily watch your wallet because there's no prices on the grocery store. You're not going to pay for it anyway. Somebody else is going to pay for it. So you load your grocery cart with all these items that have no prices. You go to the checkout, and at the checkout, the person checking you out takes up the items and scans them, and they know at the store you don't really care about the prices because you're not paying for it. And so they're just scanning it. They don't know what it's costs, and they're going to maybe jack up the cost because you don't care. Somebody else is paying for it, and that's the healthcare system that we have. But that's that's kind of what we have now. Now, in voluntary healthcare areas like cosmetic surgery or eye care, you've seen the quality and the price. So the quality's gone up and the price has gone down over the last 20 years. So those are market-based ideas that would help. So if you publish prices, if you hold medical providers accountable via price, published price, I think that you would see the quality go up and the costs come down because then you'd have competition. Um, Now, I'm kind of open to a tiered system of healthcare where you do have a baseline coverage for catastrophic stuff for everybody, and I'm open to that being government. I'm open to it. I'm undecided. And then above that, you have more premium plans that you'd have to buy into, and that would give you better services for maybe more electoral type things, electoral processes. So I'm open to that. I'm open to health savings accounts. I'm open to all those other options. I am a little bit suspicious that in the cost, or you will be degrading the service nationwide. You will be changing the incentive structures for development and to go into the medical profession. You'll be drastically messing with those incentive structures in a big way if you go to a universal system. So what that means is you have less doctors applying to be doctors, less people at medical school. The trickle down effect is tremendous. So I think there's a risk in that, and that concerns me. You don't want less doctors. You don't want less innovation. You don't want less curiosity about certain cures or whatnot because the incentive structure has been changed a lot. Let's see. Empathy isn't acquired. Yeah. Wish I could fall in. Take 0.05 out of the military budget, applied across the board. Healthcare, simple. Would that do it? Would that do it? Uh, I'm not so sure. I think the healthcare is pretty expensive. Um, Obamacare, we saw the premiums go up, right? So it's pretty expensive. Now you might be able to cost control if everybody bought in a way that you can't now. But no one, I don't know how much is an MRI, how much is heart surgery, how much is resetting your broken arm, how much is resetting your broken finger. Does anybody know? Because that's not out there. That's not a thing. And if you ask the hospital about that, you'll kind of get, your insurance company, and so there's an incentive to keep it obscure because it cuts out the consumer who might have power in the decision of who they get the service from, and that's kind of a bastardized system in my view. Openness. Incentive structures are not a myth. That's not true. No. I'll tell you why. Because small businesses, uh, you go to an accountant if you have a small business or if you have a lot of different money out there in different locations, and policy drives incentives very hard. I mean, small businesses are incentivized to grow. So they can show zero on their balance sheet at the end of the year so they don't have to pay corporate taxes. So they grow and they buy new equipment, they expand, and that's good because they start hiring more people. They that leads to job growth and whatnot. So those are good, but that's incentives, right? So if you took away, let's say if you decrease the corporate tax structure, then businesses may not grow as much. So they'd be more willing to pay corporate taxes, and therefore you'd have an increase in the corporate taxes that come into the federal treasury, but you might have a decrease of jobs, right? So that's not true. Incentives are always at play, always at play. Um, People go into medicine to help people, not money. Some, I agree. Some, not all, not all, not all. I do believe most do, but I went to college with pre-meds who are now doctors, and I know that money was a factor. I mean, that's a good life to get paid well. Yeah, for sure. Um, Now, does that mean it's inflated? Does that mean med school is inflated in terms of cost? Does that mean maybe we need to think about healthcare differently in today's world with all the information that's out there? Yeah, I think that that's possible. I mean, you could pay a lot less for med school. You could have less debt coming out of med school, therefore less salaries required for doctors. I'm open to all that. Plus, if you have competition of Western medicine from other practitioners like naturopath doctors and whatnot, and uh, maybe Eastern, I don't know a whole lot about Eastern medicine, but I know a little bit about NDs, naturopathic doctors, and using herbs instead of pharmaceuticals. You allow competition with that, hey, maybe you get some better services and decrease costs not only in the education but in the cost of care in general. So um, let me see. Let me see if I can do a call in. You want to do a call in? Let's see. Uh, okay, let me see if I can get Skype up. This will be great. This will be exciting. So let's see. I think if you have Skype here, actually, yeah, if you have Skype, just look up joel.vanbrunt, and Joel Van Brunt, JoelVanBrunt, and see if you can give me a ring in. And I think that I can possibly get the Skype call to join this broadcast. We're almost at an hour. I'm gonna have to quit soon, but um, I'm glad I'm glad to get some back and forth, and I thank you for your comments, and uh, I appreciate the difficulty in making points in short snippets. like Twitter, right? So people are trying to make points in short snippets, and sometimes that's hard. It's a topic that requires a little bit more fleshing out, a little bit more background information, a little bit more back and forth in persuasion. So let me see if there's anything else while you're setting up the Skype thing. So 12 years ago, I had this podcast with a buddy of mine, Justin, Single Malt Skull Sessions. We would argue. He was on the left, I was on the right. We'd talk for hours and yell at each other, but we were still friends. And I'm hoping that we can, just have grown-up conversations with this live cast. And I assume Bernie supporters are well-intentioned. I assume Bernie himself is well-intentioned. I'm going to assume with everybody that they're well-intentioned unless proven otherwise. And therefore, I might learn something from them. They might learn something from me, but I don't want to cast judgment and take the worst narrative about a person out there just for political advantage or to try to win an argument or to prove a point. I'm not really that interested in that. I think that's the problem with our culture, frankly. And it would be nice if we had more grown-up platforms to discuss these things in, to weed through some of the headlines that you see on Fox News or CNN or New York Times or Washington Post or Vox or National Review, wherever you see it, to just kind of cut through that stuff and make sure that it's not, um, that both sides are getting portrayed adequately. And I said this earlier this week that a good journalistic representation would be able to show you the issue, show you the one side, and steel man it. Don't straw man it. Don't make it a weak argument. Make it the strongest argument you possibly can for that side, and then show you the other side and do the same thing. Make it the strongest possible argument you can for that side. And then if it's, if it's opinion, tell them which one you're persuaded by and why. And if it's not, if it's simply news or journalistic, mainstream journalistic news, then don't take a position and let the audience decide. So that's my thought on that topic. So Justin's been tweeting me. Greg just jumped in. He's from France. He's jumped in on some of these back and forths. Oh, I do want to. Okay, I did want to talk about one other thing. I'm glad I remembered. So there's an article that I talked about earlier this week where they looked at the EU's response. So the EU's response to COVID with the individual countries, and in this article, it talked about how the EU level of response was supposed to be supporting of the member nations. And so it wasn't really designed to have a strong frontline EU response. It was more of a backfill to the individual nations, which is exactly what we have here in the US, as far as I can tell. So the federal government, you've heard it said in the press conferences, the federal government was supposed to be a backfill to the states. And each state is unique. Each state is different. Each state, the population densities, the total populations vary dramatically. Less than 1 million in South Dakota, North Dakota, and 40 million in California. I mean, very, very different. Huge metropolitan areas or hardly any metropolitan areas if you're in the Midwest in certain areas. So it seems to me that the governors and the state at the state level would have the highest situational awareness for what they need at each state and why, and hopefully have a good handle on what they have and what they need to backfill. So, and the federal would backstop that. Now, it seems to be that the critique today is that the federal response is lacking and that the federal should have been front and center. That should have been the primary level that responded, and then the states maybe just fall in line or maybe backfill. I don't know what the state role would be if the federal was the main effort. So okay, so that's the critique. So now the federal takes that. Okay, you want us to take this on? That's not really what we're designed to do. So then we're going to make it our job to figure out if what you say you need is actually what you need based on the modeling and based on the real-time data that we have. And of course, that's going to upset some people. So, hey, you don't believe us that we need, 10,000 masks or 20,000 ventilators or whatever the numbers are. And if the models say no, you're not going to need that, we're going to give you maybe a little bit more than what you need. You can see easily how that could be manipulated, and that could lead to uh, bad tempers or miscommunication or assumptions about different people politically, which is sad. So I want to make a suggestion. So the military is not too dissimilar from the structure. You have a higher headquarters, and you have underneath it different subordinate units, and they're trying to all accomplish a mission. Higher headquarters is trying to command all those units, and this unit is over here, and they darn it, they need this much ammunition and this much food. This unit over here needs this much ammunition and this much food. And you at the higher headquarters, you have to determine based on what you know about the bigger picture if this commander's right or this commander's right, or they're both right, or neither one of them are right. And I'm going to give you the limited resources that I have up at this level. I'm going to disperse that down to you in a way that I think is the best to manage across a spectrum of units that I represent. So it seems to me reasonable that the federal government would do the same thing. And what I would suggest going forward is that there is a planned drill response for emergency preparedness that happens between the states and the federal government. It can be on a national level, and I would suggest on a national level, maybe every 2 years or every 4 years, I don't know, some cycle, you have a big national drill that involves all of the states, all of the governors, all of the health experts, and you sit for a period of time, and it could be at the aid level because people are frankly busy, but you sit for a period of time and you hash through the friction points, and you just do it, and you have a cell, a group of people that are dedicated to actually running the scenario, to piping in the information into the emergency response drill. This is what we do in the private sector. This is what we do in the small business I was a part of in aviation. Hey, you have a crash. Here's the information you have, and then you're supposed to go, and you're supposed to figure it out what you're supposed to do. So, so I've seen it drilled at a micro level down at a small business, and I've seen it done for real in a small business. And so it's very helpful to have the drills first. Now, the drills are only as good as the people you have in that process, and with the churning government, you're going to have new people coming in every 8 years, every 2 years, whatever. So the drill from 2 years ago may be obsolete because now you have completely new people in that state or in the federal government, and they're not up to speed on these crisis response drills. So that lends some support to maybe the bureaucratic side, where you have an agency that has career civil servants, both at the state and the federal level, that their job is to kind of run this stuff to ground routinely. Anyway, some ideas. That way we wouldn't be figuring it out as we go during the middle of an emergency. I think that figuring out as you go during an emergency sucks. Sometimes it's unavoidable. That's what most wars are, is trying to figure out what the war is about and how to win it as you're in it. So yeah, this is not too dissimilar from war, from combat, and you are always preparing for the last war. You're never preparing for the next war because you can't really foresee what that next war is going to look like and what it's going to be. You can guess. Some guesses are right, some guesses are wrong. It's never completely right. You're always adjusting. So I think the same is true with this. You can guess what the next pandemic is going to be. You can be right. You can be wrong. You can be partially right. And we will be preparing for this pandemic in the years to come, for sure. Whether or not we start preparing for the next one, it remains to be seen. Hopefully so. Hopefully we'll get the best minds out there thinking about it and setting it up. All right, that is all I have. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for listening. I hope that you have a wonderful night. And oh wait, no, that's not it. Okay, I thought I learned how to add people, but I didn't. I think I can do Skype. I think I figured out how to do that. So that is all I have. I will talk to you guys tomorrow.